Welcome to Why Rush Racing. Welcome to another Off-Road Racing 101. Today we're talking about selection of your first race bike. Alright, so if you're a first-time racer or a seasoned pro, you may learn, okay, well, let's be honest, if you're a seasoned pro, you ain't gonna learn diddly. But you might have some, food for thought or whatever. But if you're like me when I started and not a whole real familiar with the sport, well, buckle up, I got some information for you. Alright, first thing is, bigger is not always better. Alright, so I did a little bit of research on this, and there's, I don't know, I can go on for days about this, but the key here is avoid the 450s, alright, and bigger. If you're a first-time rider, just avoid it. You might see some guys out there riding the 450s, heck, even the 500s or whatnot. You know what? Let them ride it. If you're just starting out, I want you to have as much fun as possible. And it's not going to happen on a 450 or a 500. I can almost guarantee you that. Why do I say that? Well, too much power will actually end up making you work harder, right? You will be able to get some up some of the hills easier, but how many hills or challenging hills are there where you really want to lug that bike down versus corners? And corners is really going to where you're going to wear yourself out. So that's why I say, don't always go big. Lighter is better. Just think about that. All right, so now let's take the GNCC guys as an example. Let's look at some cases here. I would say Kailub Russell is probably the undisputed top rider in the GNCC. So he typically would ride a 350cc, a four-stroke, but he actually has won a race this year and got the whole shot on a 252-stroke or four-stroke. You look at XC2 class, which would be the next class down from the top guys. Joshua Toth, he rides a two-stroke. And he's fifth overall, right? I don't know of all the bikes that are in the GNCCs, but for the most part, you'll see a lot of 350s, 250s. I don't know if you'll see many 450s. They're not really great for off-road racing. Awesome for motocross. I wouldn't say they're great for off-road racing. And you say, hey, but man, I'm like over 200 pounds, so I need that power. Well, look at Steward Baylor or even Grant Baylor. Look what they ride. They ride a 350 four-stroke. So, I don't really, my opinion, right? You can disagree with me all you want. In fact, if you do, that's awesome. Please leave comments down below. But once again, 350 or smaller is what I'm gonna say. All right, for my next point is look for a woods bike. And the easiest way to identify a woods bike is one that has an 18-inch rear tire. Now, I kind of hesitate to say that, but there's a kind of a different setup between a motocross bike and a woods bike. A lot of times, a motocross bike has a little, like if you're on a two-stroke, a little more narrow power band. They kind of deaden that power band on a woods bike to make it a little more user-friendly for the full range, because on an off-road racing, you're going to use more of that range than you will on motocross. And one of the easiest ways to identify that is with an 18-inch rear tire. Most manufacturers, if they're making a woods bike versus a motocross bike, they have the 18-inch rear on the woods bike, the 19-inch rears on the motocross. And the reason is because a lot of times that 18-inch tire will kind of absorb a lot of the rocks and the roots and stuff like that you'll hit, whereas you don't have to worry about that as much over on the motocross side. My next point is that you're not really going to go wrong by picking a bad brand, all right? So you're going to hear the KTM crowd, you're going to hear the Yamaha crowd, you're going to hear all those guys. But really, KTM, Husqvarna, Yamaha, Beta, there's a lot of great brands out there. As long as you have somebody nearby that you can buy parts from, or that will be able to service your bike, or not even service, but just kind of have an idea of what you got, you're going to be pretty well set to go. Try it out. Remember, you're just starting out. It's not going to be your last bike. It'll be your first race bike, but not your last, so don't get too tied up into it. All right, moving on. I have the same philosophy on buying vehicles, and it's this. I don't want a souped-up vehicle, in this case, a motorcycle. So what I'm looking for is a bike really as close to stock as possible. That means people really haven't messed with it too much and potentially messed it up in a bad way, right? So, if you personally, if I'm going to buy in a 252-stroke, I want to buy a 252-stroke. I don't necessarily want to buy a 252-stroke with a 300 kit. If I wanted a 300, I probably ought to go buy a 300. It's your first bike, and you want it to be as simple as possible, not a lot of extras, and, well, so leave it at that. Now, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of the 2-strokes and 4-strokes. Because really, that's really what it comes down to in my mind. And well, let's start with the 2-strokes. First of all, I do ride a 2-stroke, and there's a specific reason why. Those bikes are typically lighter. I don't know if you've seen me or not, but I'm not like some Arnold Schwarzenegger out there. I'm more like Barney Fife out there, right? I'm a pretty thin guy. I might be 6'3", but I'm like a $180, right? So I'm wanting a light bike. The 2-strokes typically have a little lower center of gravity, and what that does, it provides a little lighter feel, and you're just a little better turnability, I guess. Another big pro, and another reason why a lot of people like the 2-strokes, is they typically have less maintenance. There's one big difference between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke. A 2-stroke does not have valves, right? And valves can be kind of a maintenance item later on. Now, if you're just learning to ride though, there's one thing to keep in mind. 2-strokes, you kind of got to keep the RPMs up a little more. So like if you're going up a tough hill or something, you're gonna have to learn how to use that clutch and how to keep your RPMs up, drag the clutch a little bit so that you still have some traction go to your wheels, you have RPMs up, things like that. It's gonna make you a better rider once you learn that. So it's not a bad thing, but just starting out, it could be a little more challenging. I know I had a lot of problems with just, I felt like I was really dragging my bike, and or when it kicked in too high, when that power kind of started to hit, my bike would kind of get squirrely. As I'm getting better though, I'm learning how to control that, and I don't hardly notice as much anymore. And along those lines, different bikes will have different power bands and ranges, right? So if you do decide to go 2-stroke, just, it's gonna take some learning. Learn your bike, and you're gonna be a better racer anyway. So there you go. Now let's get on to 4-strokes. One of the biggest things people like about the 4-strokes is kind of the predictable power. They have a much smoother power that as you roll through that throttle, it's not gonna have a spot where it just bam, it like just tries to take off on you, right? It's much smoother power to it. And along those lines, because they also have higher compression, they can typically lug a little more going up those hills. A little smoother going up the hills, won't have to drag that clutch as much, and some of the tough spots, you may have a little easier time. Now, one of the cons, and talk about being a pro over on the 2-strokes, is they are a little heavier. The weight's a little higher up in the engine, so it can also feel a little heavier on the corners. And so with that, 2-stroke, 4-stroke, whatever, that debate will never be solved. And so let's just move on. Now, if you're like me and a lot of other new racers, you're probably not gonna buy a brand new bike right from the factory. You're probably gonna buy a used bike. And my number one suggestion is this. Do your research, and then once you meet the guy or whatever, or girl, and you look at it, do not feel pressured, right? He may want you to get out of their Dodge right quickly, but man, it's not like you're spending a little bit of money. This is a pretty good chunk of change to spend it here, so you wanna make sure you make good choices, right? First of all, look over it thoroughly. There's lots of guides out there about what to check for on used bikes. I suggest reading up on those and then using that practice when you get there. Definitely ride the bike, go through all the gears, make sure it shifts fairly smoothly through all the gears. And then afterwards, one thing I think is a good idea is to take a little oil sample afterwards. Make sure there's no water or something else funky in there, or shoot a lot of metal on the drain plug or something like that if there's a magnet on it. That's just some of the extra stuff I would suggest checking out beyond the standards. But just take your time doing it, and you won't make a bad choice. Okay, you might, but that's part of the risk of buying a used bike. All right, now once you got your bike, you're home, you're like, all right, well, I got my bike, I'm gonna go out and ride and race and all this stuff. Take a step back for a little bit, because I want you to have as much fun as possible on your first race. And if you're gonna be fighting your bike and your bike's gonna be beating you up the whole time you're racing, well, you're not gonna have a whole lot of fun. So what I'm gonna say is this: as best as you can, set the suspension for your weight. Check the sag, check the static sag on your bike. Look at your fork settings, and maybe start out as close to stock as possible. If it's set up for like a 120-pound race or you're 180, you might need to replace springs. But anyways, just look over your suspension, do a little bit of research, and I would suggest starting at stock and then work from there. All right, so anyways, get your suspension set right so you have as much fun as possible. And then once you got your suspension set up, spend some time on your bike, go out and ride in the public areas or wherever you got, and just get comfortable on your bike, get comfortable kind of going a little out of your comfort zone, because if you're gonna be racing, trust me, you're gonna be out of your comfort zone. And get to know your bike as best as possible before you get to your first race, and just well, just be prepared to be unprepared for how tough it is, because it's not easy. And I thought, I'm an endurance guy, it's going to be a piece of cake. It's not, still isn't, but you're going to have fun. So anyways, see you out there. Bye.